for a whole hour and realized I didn't turn it on. I was just talking to myself for a whole hour yesterday. But here I am today. Hopefully this will operate correctly. And this is Blue. Take 2. Good morning. It's 5 o'clock, Kerrville, Texas.
I had a dog and his name was Blue. I had a dog and his name was Blue. I had a dog and his name was Blue. And I bet you $5 he's a good dog too. Here, Blue. You good dog.
Good morning.
You good dog, you. Well, I shouldered my gun and I tooted my horn. Gonna catch a possum in the new grown corn. Well, old Blue barked and I came to see. Well, he had that possum right up a tree. Here, Blue. You good dog, you. Here, Blue. You good dog, you.
Oh, good morning. I love that tune. I love that lady. I don't even know that lady's name. But God, she sings beautiful. Anyway, good morning, good morning. Stevie the Guide here on the banks of the Guadalupe River in Kerrville, Texas. I had a technological glitch yesterday, and I didn't have my machine on, or it turned off by itself, or something happened. It's a strange technological world, and I could go on and on and on about that. I've been captured by this notion over the weekend. And what I talked about to myself yesterday was I've been captured by this notion that life is this game show, that we are the contestants in a game show of the highest order. And that we voluntarily enter into this game show and go through various unique challenges in order to accomplish a certain goal. And there's a distinctive way that we can win the game. And also that there is an enormous studio audience that is, or maybe a global audience, or even a universal audience that is watching this show here on Earth with great interest. And I'm reminded of when people die, especially my grandmother way back when. The minute she died, I felt like I could communicate with her much more clearly, and all of a sudden, immediately I was in contact with her and talking to her. And had the clear sense that she could hear me. The same thing happened with my father and other people. Anybody who dies, all of a sudden I get the sense that they are watching, and then they can hear my thoughts. And I actually believe this is so, and that there are billions of beings who are paying attention here, who are watching this game show on Earth. And I have a number of reasons for believing this, and one of them is certainly that in 2017 I went down to Colombia, as I've stated before in previous episodes of this live stream broadcast, that I was troubled by depression. And I wouldn't take pharmaceutical drugs, and so I went down to Colombia to take a natural plant medicine that's been used for hundreds or thousands of years by trained people, and it's called ayahuasca. And I took this, and it helped me on so many different levels that I can't say enough nice things about it. The whole experience, although it was a little scary, especially given my conservative Christian background and coming from a conservative family, to go down and do this with shamans in South America was a fairly radical thing to do, I grant you. But having lived 8 years in South America and having a familiarity with that and having a basic familiarity with psychedelics when I was young, I gave it a try, and I overcame my fear. And among other things, it helped me unload some emotional baggage about my dad and my mom and my brother and other things. And it was more than I can describe here. I have attempted for a whole week in this live stream broadcast to describe all those things. But the point I want to make with regard to this being a game show here is that one incident on one of the 4 nights that I went and drank this ayahuasca medicine, I was lifted out of my body and up into the heavens, into a celestial realm. And I was escorted ushered into a receiving line that led me into a great hall full of beautiful light beings. I was led onto the stage of this enormous theater that was packed to the gills with giggling, happy, loving light beings who all celebrated my arrival as if I was some kind of a rock star or famous sports figure. And they clapped and cheered and just went off in color and in vibration. And they don't speak in language. You can hear them all telepathically. And they can hear you and what you're saying telepathically. And I was celebrated as if I was some kind of a star of a show. And that they all knew me somehow. They knew who I was. And they paid me such tremendous respect, and their joy that I was there in their presence was just overwhelming. And they all began to throw little what I call gifts, but they were like vibrational gifts, little bits of color that would touch me and give me sensory pleasure. And they paid me all sorts of compliments and stuff in a high rate of speed. And that, for your average person who's never been through that, I grant you that's a lot to absorb. But there I was, and I'm committed to trying to communicate to you and anybody who feels like listening what my true, authentic human being experience is on this earth while I'm here. And one of the things the ayahuasca did for me was it helped lower my fear of what people's reaction is going to be, and thereby being able to freely flow my authentic self, my true experience to you because I love you and because I want to practice my craft. And as I do these live streams, it's very much like I'm a street artist on the sidewalk, painting pictures in public, and it doesn't matter much what you think about it. I paint my art. If you like it, that's great, but I'm still going to paint if you don't. Anyhow, I was celebrated in this enormous concert hall by all these loving, kind light beings, and I began to protest to them that I didn't deserve all this attention. It was just so overwhelming, the love and the respect that they were paying to me. And they all howled laughing when I expressed I wasn't worthy. And they said, "That's because you think too much, Stevie. You're a king, and you deserve all this and more. It's just you've forgotten because you think too much." And they laughed because it was almost as if they all were in on this secret of who I was, and I didn't know who I was. That's what it was. They all knew, all right? And what I realized was that they were my tribe. They were my celestial, universal audience that were watching me as I went through the steps of this life. And they were just thrilled that I was in this theater speaking to them, being able to understand them. They were expressing such joy. And they kept telling me as I went back down into my body, after this beautiful celebration and the giving of all these gifts and love and so forth, that they kept tapping me on the forehead saying, don't forget who you are. Don't forget who you are. And that, my friends, is the object of this game, all right, that we go through, this game show. And the reason I call it a game show is because there are people watching, all right? There are a lot of people, and each of us are going through this maze. You know how on TV you have these obstacle course games where the person is, walking on unstable places and jumping to trapezes and going through all these physical challenges. And there's all these people watching to see if they're going to make it or not, or if they fall into the pool or whatever. It's like that. This game show is like that, but we have a unique obstacle course here that is custom tailored specifically for us. And or each of us has our own challenges of physical, mental, emotional, situational. We come into this world as a new contestant on this game we come in bright and shining and pure, all right, from where we came from in the celestial realm. We come in there, and immediately that we hit the ground, we are bombarded by all sorts of sensory distraction. It's cold. We're in a body. Just simply to be in a body is uncomfortable. It's painful in all sorts of ways. And then you're in this hospital or wherever you're born, and you come through this difficult process to get here. And then all of a sudden, within a short period of time, your parents and whoever your caregivers are trying to teach you and mold you and shape you into something other than your pure self that you arrived with. And you're beginning to forget very quickly who you are. And they say between the ages of 0 and about 6 or 7, you're wide open, and then you start to shut down. The Jesuit priest used to say, give me a child from 0 to 7 years old, and I will give you the man. And what that means is, that from that young age, you're highly moldable and impressionable. This is the age where kids report, and in my forbidden discussions, they report that in those young ages is when they saw visions, when they had imaginary friends, when they had premonitions that someone like Aunt, Susie was going to come through the door, and she did. And they had certain supernatural experiences. But then by the age of 6 or 7, they were all shut down, and they didn't have so much of that anymore. And the reason why is that they began to be covered up and shoved into a mold, into this terrarium that I'm talking about, where you're only allowed to grow in a certain shape in a certain way. And we struggle within that experience through our lives. As we go through that obstacle course, at some point we begin to remember who we were, who we are, and where we came from. And instead of being some flawed and fallen creature, we are actually royalty, belonging. We are the valued member of a royal lost tribe. That's my best take on it. We get lost here in this world. We forget who we are. And the object of this obstacle course is to come through it with all the slings and arrows and pains and sorrows and challenges and regrets and so many things that bombard our little spirits. And physical pain and handicap and stuck in a place where we don't want to be. And through it all, the object of this game show is to remember who we are. And we are of royal lineage, and we are a member of a huge family of those beings who love us. And we are capable of all sorts of amazing things. But we have chosen voluntarily to come into this obstacle course. And why would we do that? Why would we go through all that pain and sorrow and trouble voluntarily? Who would want to do that? You see these people sometimes on these game shows, and they're getting battered and beaten and, having all sorts of trouble. They go, what's that game show, Naked and Afraid? Let's strip naked and go to the jungle and have all these challenges, right? Let's do some kind of a thing. In the military too, it's really an obstacle course and basic training. Why would you do that? Well, because you come out differently. All right. After you go through these experiences and have these hardships and challenges and work your way through, when you finally emerge at the towards the latter part, some people in the beginning of the game show, they remember who they are, and you've seen examples of these people throughout life. There's not that many of them, but Jesus and Gandhi and Krishna and other amazing leaders who have all tried to teach us that we are much greater, much more capable, and have all sorts of power than we really imagine, because we are asleep. We are in the midst of this show, and we cannot remember who we are. They've tried to teach us. I truly believe that this second coming of Christ that they talk about is much more about, rather than a physical Jesus Christ showing up, it's much more about this Christ consciousness, the raising of the vibration to a certain level where it changes the cymatic pattern of our consciousness. And we raise into a higher understanding all of a sudden. And I believe as more and more of us come awake and raise that vibration to our true nature, that it will be infectious. It will be like that vibrational transference that I talked about between giant machines. When you have a giant Ingersoll Rand compressor and it starts to vibrate improperly, the vibrational transference can affect the machine next to it. All right, and you've got to fix this machine in order to keep the other one sound. I believe the reverse is true. If one is vibrating at a very good level, it can cause the other ones to vibrate better, right? And so if you yourself, the way to change the world is truly that you have to start with yourself, all right? You have to make your vibration spin at its highest, most harmonic level, and you have to maintain that, which is the trick, isn't it? Going through all the crap we go through to be able to constantly be aware of keeping your mind, body, and spirit vibrating at such a high level all the time that not only it affects your life and your ability to realize who you are and your royal lineage in this lost tribe, but to have such a high constant vibration that you are actually transferring that to all those around you. And as more and more of us can do this, and I'm not talking about me exactly, I'm just a student here. I'm trying to get mine. Part of the reason I do this exercise every morning, even though I don't want to, is because I want that vibration to go higher. I want to drop that fear-based thought that is telling me I'm not worthy, that my voice is not worthy of being heard, and that my intuitive mind is too weird, too crazy to be accepted. There are all manner of different challenges on this obstacle course, but the reason I come here and do this every day is because I truly love humanity. And even though I haven't always expressed it that well, I'm getting better. They say before you didn't know better, but when you learn better, then do better. All right, and so each day we have a chance to learn and do better. And incremental changes, my friend, Kaizen, small incremental changes make for big results. And big. Anyway, so I was told in so many ways who I am when I took that plant medicine, and I'm grateful, very, very grateful that I went down there and did that. And I encourage you. I've been down there twice to Colombia. Here in this country, we've been taught many, many things over a couple hundred years, and a lot of the things we've been taught come also from our European heritage. And basically, it's about power and control of your mind. He who controls the narrative controls the universe. That's a quote from somebody, but I just remembered it. He who controls the narrative controls the universe. And the big corporations around here, whether they be for-profit or non-profit, the big corporations have certainly controlled much of the narrative. And much of the reason they do that is for power and control of the marketplace. So, a weapons manufacturer has got to control the narrative to win the hearts and minds of the people that we need to produce more weapons and bomb folks, okay? They need that, all right? They need to be able to control the public opinion in order to get us into war. And so they use all sorts of tricks and media to do that. The pharmaceutical industry, they've got to control the narrative about the use of their chemically manufactured products rather than the natural plants of the land and the natural healing remedies. And those are labeled as bad or evil or of the devil or what have you. The natural plants are here God-given for a reason. And part of the problem here is that our elders have been run off or thrown in jail or killed. The people who could teach us things about the ancient practices are largely gone, although it's coming back. Because of the public demand, because of the raising of the vibration, there are more people now allowed. They've insisted on being allowed to do research on things like psilocybin mushrooms. Johns Hopkins is currently doing all sorts of studies once again because the laws have been changed so that they can study the natural plants as they relate to mental health. Back in the 50s, they were doing wonderful things at Johns Hopkins with mental health. And you might recall Bill W. of the Alcoholics Anonymous program. This was a man whose life was completely destroyed by chemical-based alcohol. And his wife was gone, his job was gone, and he recovered from alcoholism and came up with the Alcoholics Anonymous program at the VA hospital in Los Angeles, where he took a psychedelic drug and had an encounter with the Almighty. And he came up with a vision of Alcoholics Anonymous. That's Bill Wilson, of the founder of Alcoholics Anonymous. It came from a psychedelic experience. He actually wanted to incorporate psychedelics into the Alcoholics Anonymous program, but he was overruled by the board, who, they, wanted to keep people from taking substances that were harming them. Anyway, I guess the point I want to make is that it's a game, all right? It is a game, and you're going through this obstacle course to get better. In basic training in the military, you have to go through a certain game that they play, all right? And it's not a nice game. You go through Navy SEAL training, it's not a fun game, okay? It's a hard game. It's one of the hardest on this planet, right? And they put you through all kinds of physical and mental and emotional sort of challenges to see if you're going to crack and see if you're going to panic. And why do they do that? is because when you get through that obstacle course, they will change you into someone who's more capable of dealing with a larger theater of operations, which they know about. They know about these things they're going to teach you about. And so it's kind of like a game of a blind man's bluff. I don't know if you ever played this game when you were young, but they put a blindfold on somebody and then they spin them around to make them disoriented. Okay, and once they get you blind and disoriented, then all the kids scramble around. I can't remember exactly how it was played. It's either I think the kids have to stand in place and the blind person has to find them, or it may be that they can move around. I can't really remember exactly. As I recall, the other opponents would get to move around, but they couldn't go outside of a certain circle. And I think that's how it went. But anyway, you're blind and you're disoriented in blind man's bluff. And it's very much like that here. I've told you about when I became a scuba diving instructor, and our final challenge was to go down into this flooded quarry and go scuba diving blindfolded. They put a piece of tinfoil in our mask and we could not see. And we had to go scuba diving through the water without vision. And there were the instructors were down there and they would mess with you and pull your regulator out of your mouth and flood your mask. And, they'd drop this little drop net thing on you. And they wanted to see if you're going to panic or if you were going to calmly, recover yourself and move on. And this life is much like that. It's about remembering your highest and best self. I had this girlfriend one time years ago, and she'd always ask me, "Is that your highest and best? Are you being your highest and best now? Is that your highest and best self?" And what exactly is highest and best? That used to bother me, but the reason it bothered me because I knew it was true. All right, I knew it was true. And so what exactly is one's highest and best self? Well, I think most people don't even really know. I think that we have been taught for so long that we're these flawed and fallen creatures, that we stink, that we're weak, that we're overweight, that we, that through this obstacle course, we're taught that we're sickly and that we're broken and that we, to be fearful of just going outside. And I mean, fear is a good thing to a point. It's good not to go play out in the busy street. You should be afraid of that. But at the same time, it is that fear that governs our life. I took a 2-week Tony Robbins seminar in Hawaii back in 1989. And Tony Robbins, the famous motivational speaker, he had us walking on fire and jumping off telephone poles and all kinds of wild stuff. And we were working out with a martial arts master in the morning. And we had all vegetarian food and a lot of different challenges and new things we were introduced to. But one of the core premise of Tony Robbins' teaching and its global influence that he's had is this notion that people do things for only two reasons, either to gain pleasure or to avoid pain. That's the only reason you do anything, all right, is to gain pleasure or to avoid pain. And he contends that you would do more to avoid pain than you will to gain pleasure. And he uses an example of that. You would do more if you had $1 million, you would do more to protect that $1 million than you would to go out and make $1 million. And so there's a lot of truth to what Tony said. And avoiding pain is this prevalent notion in our mind. And it's part of what keeps the vibration very low, all right, in society in general. Avoiding pain. And what do I mean by that? in keeping our vibration low, in not being our true and authentic self, and not letting our own light shine in its own unique way, and painting our picture. No one can dance your dance. No one can sing your song. No one can tell your story. All right? Why? Why is it that we are afraid to express ourselves openly and honestly and so forth? Why are we cloaked in this garment called normal, so we'll fit in with the herd? Why? It's because we are afraid of a basic primal tribal instinct, and that is the need to belong. The need to belong. And our need to belong, it goes back to tribal days where you're in the tribe, and you're in the family, in the group. And if you don't have that back in the old days, you die. It was the tribe that protected you, the tribe that fed you, the tribe that cared for you when you were sick. And there's certainly some of that today, but so as society progressed, the tribe who protects you and gives you safety, they also come up with lots and lots and lots of rules to control the herd, to make sure that our tribe is us, and we're here, and you're one of us, you're accepted here. And there's rules and norms and regulations. And so, especially when organized religion came along, they started making all sorts of rules about what kind of person you had to be in order to be in this tribe. And in any expression of your right brain intuitive, any expression of funny behavior or thoughts that were inconsistent with those of the tribe, especially the spiritual leaders, if it was inconsistent and you intuitively knew things, and you had seen things, and you had been out of your body last night, or you knew about instinctively about vibrational healing or natural plant medicine. Oftentimes, one of the worst offenders of the tribe was the little old lady on the edge of town or the edge of the village who didn't really hang around with too many people. She certainly didn't go to church, and she was the knowledgeable person that you'd take your kid to go be healed if your child was sick. She was the midwife that cared for the women when they're having babies. She was the one that knew things, and she was interesting. And so that's the one you want to get rid of, And so anyway, a lot of our fears about being ourselves and remembering our royalty, remembering that we are not just a drop in the ocean, we are the ocean, all right? And remembering that, and not being, the light beings up in the celestial heavens where I went, they howled laughing at me. They thought it was so funny that I believed that I was unworthy, and they thought it was the funniest thing they had ever heard. And it has left a deep impression on me. Those light beings up there, they are as real to me as any human I see walking around here now. And it is part of my reality. Howard Caesar, who wrote this 1 + 1 is 1, which is a great book, he's had some experiences that are not induced by plant medicine, but they're induced by deep meditation. In India, they put him in a dark room for 5 days, and he had many similar experiences to what I did in Colombia. And he's done deep meditation, silence exercises, things like that. Buddhist monks have these kind of experiences too. And what you realize is that it's a game, it's a ride, and it leads me to Bill Hicks, who was a famous comedian who died way too early, and he has this quote. I saw it on YouTube, and it's just so absolutely true, and it's a little bit long, but I'm going to read it for you. And Bill Hicks says, "The world is like a ride in an amusement park, and when you choose to go on it, which you do choose, When you choose to go on it, you think it's real because that's how powerful our minds are. The ride goes up and down and round, and it has thrills and chills, and it's very brightly colored, and it's very loud, and it's fun for a while. Many people have been on the ride a long time, and they begin to wonder, hey, is this real, or is it just a ride? And other people have remembered, and they come back to us and say, hey, don't worry, don't be afraid ever, because this is just a ride. And we kill those people. Shut him up. I've got a lot invested in this ride. Shut him up. Look at my furrows of worry. Look at my big bank account. Look at my family. This has to be real. But it's just a ride. But we always kill the good guys who try to tell us that. You ever notice that? And let the demons run amok. But it doesn't matter because it's just a ride. Let me say that again. We always kill the good guys who try to tell us the reality of this situation, like Jesus. We always kill those people because they're trying to tell us that it's something more than the right here and now. Anyway, and we let the demons run amok. But it doesn't matter because it's just a ride, and we can change it anytime we want. It's only a choice. No effort, no work, no job, no savings of money. Just a simple choice right now between fear and love. The eyes of fear want you to put bigger locks on your doors, buy guns, and close yourself off. The eyes of love instead see all of us as one. And so we're always killing the weird ones, like Jesus. All right, we're always killing those guys because, and let's see, like Gandhi, and there's many other examples. The people who are trying to tell us that it's just a game, it's just a ride, and that we're going through this exercise, and that we are much more than we are led to believe. And in my opinion, we have the ability to change the frequency of our radio and gain access to a much higher level of consciousness, that Christ consciousness. And when we raise ours and maintain ours at a constant level, at a much higher level, which we are capable of if we go through certain steps, then it transfers to the humans around us, and thereby creating a change. The second coming of Christ that they talk about is, in my opinion, simply a second coming of that higher Christ consciousness, which was here before on this planet when people could build pyramids and do all these other fantastic things. And if you haven't spent any time around these ancient structures, I have not been to the Great Pyramid of Giza. I was just talking to a friend of mine about that yesterday. But I think it stands to reason that Egypt was the capital of this planet, and from there they were able to move all around this planet. They could fly around this planet. They could talk with each other wirelessly like we do. They had complete access of the invisible radio waves, and they could build things and manipulate matter in ways that we are only just beginning to figure out. And in his book *Sapiens*, what's the guy's name? Harari. Mr. Harari, Dr. Harari, talks about, in just a short while, ladies and gentlemen, the human beings of tomorrow will look back on the human beings of today, and they'll say, wow, those guys were just like Neanderthals, you know? And in some ways, we truly are. And I think a lot of it has to do with our understanding of our own ability to read and transmit and receive vibration and frequency. Nikola Tesla, the famous scientist back in the early 1900s, he said, if you want to understand the world and the universe, think in terms of vibration and frequency. And that, my friends, is the way that it works. You know, and people think that's so crazy. People say, oh, vibration and frequency, here we go, some woo-woo kind of stuff. But these are the same people that will use one of these cell phones every day and never question that there are invisible frequency waves that we use in all sorts of ways, and satellite communication. I mean, I can look at this thing and watch television, something on live TV on the other side of the planet. How is that possible? But we discount the power of our mind. We are taught not to use it. And much of that has to do with this chronic left brain logical that I talk about so often. And it's really, truly what drives me. How to make this thing work properly in order to get the full benefit of it. We are trained because the tribe that we are so instinctively connected to, it also has rules, and a lot of those rules center around you're using this part of your brain rather than this one. And so we don't know. This small, still voice, this inner child, this inner artist, it stays quiet most of the time. And it's sunk down. It's like a little child that... if the child comes to you and wants to play and wants to play and wants to play, but you are so busy that you shoo him away or certainly treat him like he's unwelcome, what's a normal child going to do? That child is going to go off into its room, and it's going to learn very quickly that you don't want to play. And so you will, that child will stay in its room until the day that you call it, all right? When you call him back and say, you know what, little Bobby, little Susie, I do want to play. I do. And you begin to reestablish a relationship with that inner child of yours, and that playful, artistic child that's afraid to come out, that's afraid to express, that's afraid to do the instinctive things because it's so busy in this left brain logical, it has no time. That right inner child needs time. And meditation practice helps that inner child come out, helps that right brain intuitive come up. And that, my friends, you've been taught, and I've been taught ever since I was little, that intuitive part of us is the weak part. All right, the undesirable part. In fact, it is the most powerful part. It is the spiritual part. And organized religions bring out some of that, but they create these limitations. I call it a terrarium, and it will not allow us to fully express and fully be who we are supposed to be. And so they insist, like Bill Hicks, this is real. It has to be real. I have too much involved here. My friend, the lawyer here in Kerrville, Texas, he tells me you can't imagine how many rich guys come into his office and want to write up a will, and they start dictating to him, what they want in their own will. And they say, if I die, I want this to go here and that to go there, and these people to get this, and so forth. And the lawyer stops him and says, you can't write the will that way. And he goes, why not? That's the way I want it. And he says, no, because you don't start the will by if I die, all right? The proper terminology is when I die. This thing's really going to happen. You are going to leave here, and you will have none of the toys, none of the things that you gained here, only the knowledge, all right? Only the experience is the important part. And it all centers around your ability to remember who you are, which is a loving, joyful, kind, light being that's been stuck in this flesh body to go through this obstacle course. And you've been deliberately blinded as to who you actually are. All right? The only reason you might be flawed and fallen is because you can't remember who you actually are, which is an heir of God. That's who you are. You're not a subject. You are actually an heir, right? You're not a subject of the crown, my friend. You're not one of the serfs, one of the peasantry, right? You are actually an heir to the crown. You are a son of God, and you are simply trying to remember who you are. And that is what they told me, and that is who I am. And so trying to walk in those royal shoes, to remember who I am, to have the self-esteem that knightship, or being a prince of the crown, and being a part of the ocean, and actually remembering that I have many of those gifts too. The constant effort to crack out of the egg, at some point, the little chicken either dies inside the egg, or he breaks free. That bluebird breaks out of the shell and comes into the light and is born. And he's able to stretch his wings and look around, and eventually practice flapping those wings and learn how to fly. And so I think that there's so much to learn about consciousness and who we are. And it's really the most exciting thing about vibration and frequency, not of the cell phone, not of the radio, not of any other thing, but of the human consciousness. It's vibration and frequency. And whatever way I can, I'm just like a curious little beagle, sniffing around, trying to turn over rocks, find the answers. And I may spend the rest of my life looking around, turning over rocks, but it's what I like to do because my inner child is becoming awake. It wants to know. And most people, it's amazing to me, most people are not curious. How did they build those pyramids anyway? Who were these people that could build pyramids? You get to looking around our planet. Our planet is absolutely littered with structures and enigmas that we cannot explain. Obviously, to me, came from a civilization of people who had a much greater grasp of higher consciousness than we did. The legendary city of Atlantis, some say the reason we can't find that sunken island is because it was the whole world that went down underwater, and then it reemerged after wiping out all the people, and only a few survivors are left, and that's who we are, is this ragtag survivor race that is only gradually coming back into awareness of who we are. And we've had these dominating little warlords who run the show and beat us down into believing that we're just some kind of a servant race, rather than each being our own independent kingdom within. And but it's coming, and they don't want it. You can see it all over the place. It's almost like a ticking time bomb, like on James Bond. When the time bomb is ticking down to detonation, it seems to tick faster, and it seems like a lot of that is happening now. And it's actually a scary but very exciting time. And as we move through this game show of life, the way I see it is you work on yourself and raise your own vibration, and it becomes infectious, and people feel it. They don't have to be explained. The left brain logical. I read a book from a pastor who's a very nice man, and he's got a PhD in biblical philosophy. All right, it was the most left brain logical gobbledygook about spirituality that I ever saw in my life. And it was the most unexplainable thing. He had pages and pages in there that I couldn't even understand, because it was so logical, trying to connect all the secrets and mysteries of spirituality, when really it is not. You cannot find any end. It's a maze. What my Cuban pastor, Julio Gonzalez, I love you with all my heart, Julio, and he talks about a laberinto, un lugar sin salida, or a place, a labyrinth. It's a place that with no exit, all right, and this ridiculous argument over religion and who controls spirituality is the dumbest game of all. It really is. This notion that somehow we have the logical answer and we've got the set of rules and all you have to do is follow a certain creed is ludicrous. And the insanity of that is becoming more and more clear. The simple, when you cut me right to the bone, folks, I'm a simple slob, you know, and I can understand and can feel the presence of Jesus and the simple teachings of Jesus Christ, easy to understand. Love thy neighbor as thyself, you know, do good, not bad. Go off and meditate on your relationship with the source, Father. These are simple, easy principles. But you take Jesus, something so simple, radical, mind you. He had a radical notion because he did not fall within the rules, all right? He did not walk in the Pharisees and Sadducees, coloring lines. He was a radical, and he followed intuition. He followed spirit. He knew who he was, all right? And he was a son of God, and he tried to teach us, as are you, right? These things are easy for Stevie to understand, all right? But when you start trying to frame it in something so complicated as a collection of stories called the Bible, and there are numerous Bibles with varying stories and different translations, and through the ages, the left brain fucking eggheads, I'm sorry about that, have tried to shape it and mold it with rules and regulations and interpretations and so forth in this habitual left brain logical way, and burn the people who didn't believe them, conquer towns and kill people and torture them until they said, okay, we've had enough, we'll build your church if you want. This is not the way of Christ. Remember, Christ was not a Christian. This was not his religion. It wasn't even formed until many, many years later. 325 years after the birth of Christ was the Council of Nicaea, where they compiled and published the Bible with the creative control of the Vatican and the merger between the Vatican and the Roman Empire. These are the people that brought you the Word of God, all right? That's the people that created the whole structure around it. The other Protestants, they took it and they shaped it to the way they wanted it. But in essence, it comes from them. Jesus was nowhere around for this, all right? And so I'm a simple slob. When you start running all that scenario at me, it's like when you take a glob of Jell-O and put your hands around it and start to squeeze, Stevie just oozes out the sides, and that's what happened to me. But I can follow a basic spirituality, and those things that bring my spirituality higher, my vibration higher, my frequency to its optimum level. How do you do that? Well, physically you have a body, so proper nutrition, proper exercise, and proper fun and recreation, not all work. It's got to be balanced. And then to do those things mentally, and the monks, I lived at a Buddhist monastery for a year and a half just to recover from all that 20 plus years of religion. And the monks were super nice to me, and I don't know all about Buddhism, but I observed their way of life and assisted them in, taking care of that beautiful ranch outside of Marble Falls where I lived for 18 months. And I learned the value of silence and the value of calming myself all the way down, and the value of meditation practice. And I would sit and I could never, all the monks there at the temple, they speak Thai, and I don't speak Thai really, even though I spent a lot of time in Thailand, and it's where I got an appreciation for Buddhism. But the sitting in silence and the chanting that they do, the chanting different mantras, different things that still the mind. They calm the restless left brain logical, and they allow the right brain intuitive to come forward, and they raise the vibration. These are some of the most highest vibrational beings on this planet, Buddhist monks, is because they do exercises every day to promote that stronger right brain intuitive, to bring out that inner child. And they do all sorts of beautiful things creatively. They dedicate themselves completely to what they're doing, whether it be gardening or cleaning or making some kind of artistic thing, or I built some small buildings with them. They're completely focused people. And I'm reminded of a Tom Cruise movie called The Last Samurai, where he's this, sort of crude, drunken American soldier who's captured by the samurai and taken into their community for a year. And after he settles down into it, which it took me a while to settle into that lifestyle. I didn't become a monk. I was just there to assist and serve. But he observed their lifestyle and how focused and dedicated the Japanese samurai were. And I felt very much like that Tom Cruise character when I lived at the monastery. It's a 35-acre ranch out in the middle of nowhere outside of Marble Falls in the Texas Hill Country. And it was a phenomenal experience for which I am very, very grateful. And it was part of this emerging process that happened. And I believe that there is a point in many people's lives, not everyone certainly, but that when the cognitive dissonance, the friction becomes so great that you suffer, as I did, between what you're being taught and the tribal rules and norms and what you instinctively know. And those two things rub up together. And at some point, you're either going to stay and live what Henry David Thoreau calls a life of quiet desperation, or you're going to do what Henry David Thoreau did and walk confidently in the direction of your dreams, and thereby live a life unknown in common hours. I can't remember how it's phrased, but read the Walden Pond by Henry David Thoreau. It'll tell you about that. And anyway, this game of life is really about going through these obstacles and remembering who we are, remembering our royal bloodline. I'm reminded of a movie called The Knight's Tale, where they got Heath Ledger. They finally, locked him up in the stocks, and they're throwing tomatoes at him, and he's a loser. And this king comes up and releases him and knights him and says, "My researchers have discovered that this man is of an ancient royal bloodline, and thereby it cannot be questioned. And I submit to you, whoever you are, if you're watching, that is in fact who you are. You are the heir to an ancient royal bloodline, and you have forgotten. And it is now time, if you are able, to put on those boots, so to speak, and actually begin to walk as the king that you are and the queen that you are, and to remember that, and in doing that, I believe in the balance between the left and right brain, there is a certain spark that happens to the human being, that Christ consciousness, that beautiful spark, that realization of who we are and the ability to function fully in who we are. And when that happens, the vibration goes up to that next cymatic level, the cymatic pattern. The vibration changes, and the pattern changes to a much more complex understanding, let's say, that second coming of Christ, that Christ consciousness, that I believe Jesus was trying to tell us about. He said it was going to come, and I believe it is going to come, and I believe it's coming now. And I believe more and more people are waking up to realize who they are and not be under the oppression of all these for-profit and non-profit corporations, but to live harmoniously with each other in a world that's beautiful and gives us plenty of time to create and be who we're supposed to be. So there you have it. I think I've pretty much covered it. And remember that you have a celestial audience watching you all the time. And when I think of God, the word God, what I think of these days is the billions and billions of us who are both here but also in the celestial realms that are watching and hoping and applauding and cheering and sometimes trying to help us in little ways. These are the angels they speak of. These are the spirit guides they speak of, and they are there and they're watching and they're pulling for you. And so I hope you have a wonderful day. It's Tuesday, and I'm here, Stevie the Guide, Steve Dyer on the banks of the Guadalupe River, and you have a good one. I love you very, very much.
Not so hard, well, it cracked the ground in my backyard. So I dug his grave with a silver spade and I loaded him down with a golden chain. I cried, you good dog, you.
I love you.
You good dog, you. Go get him, Blue.
Go get 'em, Blue.